Hello and welcome to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. The scandal that keeps on giving. The steady stream of Snowden-related leaks no longer surprises, but the all-encompassing scope of spying still does. Even online gamers have not been spared. All the while, the powers that be are hesitant to rein in the NSA. In fact, they appear only want to make legal what is now illegal. Is it time for an international bill of digital rights? To CrossTalk, the surveillance state, I'm joined by my guest, Suzanne Nossel in New York. She is the executive director of the Pan American Center. And in Washington, we cross to Eugene Puryear. He is a national organizer with the Answer Coalition. All right, CrossTalk rules. In fact, that means both of you can jump in anytime you want. Eugene, if I go to you first in Washington, ever since this scandal with the NSA broke with as a result of Mr. Snowden, we've gotten one leak after another. And we've been told to date that it's only about 1% of what he is willing to, through other people, obviously now, to expose. And I watch all of these leaks coming out, and at first I had to be, like most everyone, just really quite shocked and amazed. And now I'm not shocked or amazed anymore. The only thing that really concerns me, because I'm in media, is just how encompassing it is. It seems like people are kind of dulled by it. I mean, they just know we're calling this program Digital Octopus. And even when we see that symbol, I don't see the outrage and the grassroots. Why is that?
Well, I think that we've seen some outrage. I think here on October 26th in Washington, D.C., there are many thousands of people protesting it. But I think in some ways it's such an all-encompassing program, it's very difficult for people to wrap their mind around it. Needless to say, the government is doing everything possible to sow misinformation about this program in the populace that I'm not even 100% sure people know what they can do and what is going on, because it's so all-pervasive and the government is so consistently lying. And I think that certainly having all this revealed has a chilling effect on protests in this country, whereby people are now very concerned about if they speak out, how will that be seen? How will that be held against them? Their actions, their movements, their writings, who they're talking to, how will that all affect their ability to be effective in the public arena? And I think we're seeing not only a conversation, but a really internal conversation amongst people in terms of how they challenge these sorts of policies. And I think in this new terrain, it's very difficult.
Suzanne, how do you react to that? Because Eugene kind of jumped to my next point, or actually almost my last point here, is it does have a chilling effect on dissent. And, you know, people are going to being far more careful in what they say. And we still don't know to what extent it is all-encompassing, because one leak after another. I mean, gamers now, they're watching gamers. I mean, my goodness. What a wonderful way to spend taxpayers' money. What are they trying to get by studying gamers? My point is that everyone is aware of it. Is it sinking in to just how maybe dangerous this can be?
Well, we did a survey of Pan American Center members, American writers, to ask them how they're reacting to these revelations. And what we found was they're far more up in arms than the general population. Mm-hmm. About 90% said they were very concerned about NSA surveillance. And we were surprised to learn that just about a fourth of American writers were self-censoring in some way. They told us they were restricting what they post on social media, who they talk to, who they email with, and even what subjects they take on in their writing, out of concern that they could attract some sort of trigger and warrant the NSA's attention, and they wanted to avoid that. And in a sense, I think we can look at writers as the canaries in the coal mine on this. They're the ones who depend on free expression for their livelihood, for their craft. So if they're this concerned and they're actually changing their behavior, I think the rest of the public is not going to be too far behind, and that there may be real grounds for concern that people will restrict their political activities, be wary about who they work with, who they make contact with, whether they're going to take part in a protest. I don't know that we've seen that yet, but I don't think,
Suzanne, if I could stay with you, if I could stay with you, I thought the NSA was looking for terrorists. You're talking about writers.
Well, it's true. And you know, some writers have reacted to our survey saying, this is ridiculous. Writers have a job to do. They have nothing to be afraid of. They need to write more and be more aggressive in taking on sensitive topics. When we asked people what sorts of topics they felt leery of writing about, the answers weren't too surprising. It had to do with terrorism in some cases, writing about the Middle East, writing about the military. So topics, subjects, keywords that might somehow kick over a tripwire and bring them to the NSA's attention.
Okay, Eugene, so would you agree with me that this is the actual intention of the NSA? I seriously doubt they think everybody in America and Americans living abroad and countless tens of hundreds of millions of people around the world are terrorists. But one thing, the outcome, and we've just heard it on this program, is the chilling effect. Is that maybe the real purpose of this program or programs, is to make people wary of speaking out?
Oh, I think so for sure. I mean, if we look at one of the sayings that we use the most here in America, knowledge is power. If the NSA is attempting to control essentially all the communications and knowledge and information resources on the entire internet all over the world at all times, then what else could they really be using it for if it isn't to manipulate that power to cause people to do things or not do certain things? It's really just an extension of the military power, and the NSA is an arm of the Pentagon. It's really an extension of military power that the U.S. uses in exactly the same way, except it's even more pervasive because it deals with almost every single aspect of our personal lives. And I think that it's absurd for them to say, oh, well, this is just about terrorists. With the video game thing, they've seen that they didn't even find any terrorists, but they just saw, well, this is online, and maybe something online, terrorists could go in here and they could use it, maybe, who knows. So let's just go in there, monitor the whole thing, spy on all these people, and if we find something, we find something, and that's just how it is. So it's clear that their mentality is to not really look at things that are potentially threats, but to just control all information resources and then use it how they see fit.
Well, Suzanne, the NSA, head of the NSA has actually come out. I mean, first
look, I see it a little bit differently.
Go ahead, jump in.
Can...
Go ahead, jump in, please do.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, look, I see it a little bit differently. I do think that the impetus and the genesis for these programs has to do with tracking down terrorists and being able to connect the dots so that attacks can be prevented. But I think what we've seen is that the technology and the capabilities have moved forward and advanced so fast that now they're able to sweep in such large quantities of information, and there's been very little oversight, scrutiny, or real deliberation about whether these vast volumes of information are useful to actually prevent attacks, whether we have the capability to sort through them effectively so that law enforcement is focused on the right areas, and also what the consequences are of living in a society where so much is swept in. So I'm not as ready to judge the motives behind this or to say that the real goal is to chill speech. I think the motives originally may have been quite genuine, but what we've not had is a proper weighing up of the consequences of these incredibly powerful technologies and the way that they have transformed intelligence gathering.
You know, if the motives were genuine, which who knows, maybe they were, I think that we've seen just an archipelago of lies from the government. If their motives were genuine, I don't think they'd be consistently trying to conceal every single aspect about this to the point of lying in front of Congress about what they're doing, and then as soon as it comes out saying, okay, well, we do this, but we don't do that, and then it turns out that they do that in the next set of leaks, that they would be interested, if it was genuine, in having most of this or more of this come out so that it could really truly be evaluated in the public sphere. But they're trying to prevent any sort of evaluation on the efficacy of these programs and what's really going on coming at all. I mean, we've seen that the bills in Congress, the supporters of those bills, Ron Wyden and others, have said that even though they believe they have significant support on the floor of the Congress, they haven't been moved out of committee at all yet. So there's a significant attempt by supporters of this surveillance state to prevent any sort of evaluation of what's going on with these programs and the technology and where technology has taken us, which leads me to believe their motives are not, in fact, genuine.
Okay, Suzanne, I mean, one of the interesting things, I would tend to...
Well, I think there are a couple of things at work. I mean, one is they've gotten...
Go ahead.
They've gotten used to having these capabilities. They now have entire huge teams devoted to absorbing this data, analyzing this data. They've become inured to having this incredible volume of information. So I think it's become very difficult for them to think about how they would live without it, even though they did live without it even until just a few years ago. And I think the other piece that weighs heavily is the idea that sometime, somehow, there will be a terrorist attack that will come to fruition, and somebody will come back and make the argument that had the powers of surveillance not been restricted or been subject to regulation, that the dots would have been connected and such an attack might have been prevented. So I think there are a couple of strong political factors that, as you say, are weighing against the correct impulse, which is really to shine a light of transparency on these programs and for the Congress and the courts to do their jobs of weighing up these competing interests of intelligence gathering, national security, privacy, the First Amendment. These are very fundamental issues and values of our country that are now at stake and that are now potentially pitted against one another. And what is most dangerous, I think, is that the courts and the legislature abdicate their role because on grounds of national security or on grounds of secrecy, that they don't take the proper and probing look at all of this.
Well, again, Suzanne, if I can stay with you, I mean, it gets down to trust as well. I mean, we've had members of the NSA come out and lie in public in front of Congress, and now we hear that we still have to be able to connect the dots. I mean, it's very disingenuous to listen to an agency that with so much power and so much funding and to lie to us and then say, well, now you can trust us now because, well, you know that. Well, what's going to happen when the rest of the 99% of what Snowden took is released? Are we going to be trusting them as much?
Yeah, look, I think there are definite grounds to question the assertions here, and that's why I think it's so important that the courts and the Congress do their job. They have access to confidential information. They can hold hearings in secret if necessary. But clearly, it's a situation where the American people no longer trust what the administration is saying, and we need to restore that. And the only way, I think, to restore it is to bring the light of day to these programs and to have
we're going to go to a short break, and after that short break, we'll continue our discussion on the NSA. Stay with RT. Welcome back to CrossTalk, where all things are considered. I'm Peter Lavelle. To remind you, we're discussing the surveillance state. Okay, Eugene, I'd like to go back to you in Washington. In looking at all of the funding, the budgeting that goes to all of these spy agencies here, are we getting good value for our money here? Because I just don't see the great plots that are being being found out and capturing people and all these trials and all. You'd think you'd get a little bit of more result from it. I mean, again, it gets down to trust. When we're told, well, we made sure that three different attacks didn't happen, but we can't tell you about it because it's a secret. I mean, I'm not, I may look dumb, but I'm not stupid.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we're certainly not getting bang for our buck. I mean, we've seen even in Congress that there's been significant debate amongst congressmen and senators who do have this information about how effective these programs have been at stopping particular terrorist acts. We've seen certain things that the NSA has put out in the media. Other journalists have questioned whether, in fact, it was mass surveillance. And so I think quite clearly we haven't seen a very strong evidence that, in fact, that the many attacks were stopped and it's effective as possible. But the other side of that coin is also, I mean, it's like if you ask me to cook a chicken, whether I bake it or whether I fried it, I've cooked a chicken. So you say, well, look, we've stopped 3 terrorist attacks here using mass surveillance. But who's to know that that was, the best way, the most effective way? It's all just take our word for it. It's all secret. There's nothing we can do. So I'd say we get almost no value. And quite certainly until the American people can have all of this seen, have all of this, these programs that are shedding their constitutional rights put on the table, there's no way for us for even to be able to judge the claims made by the NSA or people like Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Suzanne, if I go back to you in New York, is it a false dichotomy, our security and our liberty? Because it sounds nice, but do we really have to give up one to get the other? And if you're willing to give up one to get the other, you don't get either.
Look, I think that's true. And I think what's challenging in this debate is, the original figures that were given out, 50 terrorist plots thwarted. Quickly, under the light of scrutiny, that number got reduced to, I think, about 13 attacks involving U.S. soil. And when details were released about a few of those facts didn't seem to hold up either. Reporters were able to generate information suggesting that the key leads and links in detecting those plots came not from mass surveillance, but from other sources of data. So I think we have to really look hard at this claim that we have to trade off our liberty for national security and be able to weigh that up. And I think what is at stake here, and perhaps is only beginning to be highlighted in the public debate, is that we're trading away not just the Fourth Amendment protections against search and seizure, but also First Amendment liberties. I mean, the idea that there are writers self-censoring, you know, whether you agree with that or not, whether you think they ought to be more courageous and speak their minds nonetheless, there are writers who are holding back. So there are ideas, there are stories that are not making it into the marketplace. And, you know, here in the United States, that's really a pretty astonishing thing. I mean, at an organization like PEN, we're used to doing work on behalf of writers around the world who are subject to censorship or who self-censor because they know that in China, in Iran, you know, they're going to be jailed for what they write. We're not used to that here at home, and I think that needs to sink in the courts and in the Congress to recognize that we really are trading away some quite fundamental values potentially.
You know, I think it's really interesting, Eugene, because all through my life, and I'm a child of the Cold War, we were never taught to be wary and afraid of the state because we were always afraid of other states. And now it's seeping in somehow, well, for very good reason, that, you know, the state is not necessarily our friend because if you're a person under surveillance, then you cannot be free.
Lost it.
And I think that's beginning to make a connection with people.
No, I think so for sure. I mean, you know, the state has certain interests. We look at what's going on in U.S. politics. We see that it's big business primarily that's running things. And so you look at the average person, you see that not only do you feel alienated from politics, that's why we see, you know, not that many people even vote in the first place, particularly amongst young people, but you also see this massive security state, and you start to think, wow, I mean, this cannot be my friend. In fact, we have to recognize we have an antagonistic relationship between the two. And I think that, quite frankly, this is a terrible thing to be happening in our country, to have this massive system, and really to the world, to have this massive system where a few people in complete secrecy can monitor anyone in the world. And let's be clear, if we look at the Obama administration's rationale for who are terrorists, they say they don't have to tell you why they declared a certain person a terrorist either. So who knows how this information could be used now or in the future against the American people. And I think that's a very, very scary thing, and the people of the world as well. And it's a massive intrusion on our rights and trampling on the ones of people around the world.
Eugene, if I can stay with you, I think it's very interesting is we have this kind of a sick paranoia that is sunk in the U.S. government, because I think everyone obviously wants to avoid to have a major a terrorist attack against the United States. Nobody wants that, and no sane person wants that. And then you get this organization like the NSA, and they'll say, we'll protect you, and then they realize, oh my goodness, what we can do with all of this information here. And it's, you know, violating people's privacy, going after dissidents, going after journalists, and oh, you know what, we can make some money this way too, because we can cheat this government, we can help this company. I mean, it's really kind of turned into a kind of Frankenstein monster because I agree with what Susan had to say in the beginning of the program. I mean, maybe the initial ideas of keeping an eye on things of course is rational, is what one should do, but it's kind of just turned into something so much bigger, and it's being used in a very malign way.
Yeah, I mean, and it's a false dawn, this idea that, well, just give us all this power and we will protect you. I don't think that that's possible. Okay. I think that ultimately, if we really look at what's going on here, it narrows the debate in a very serious way, and it makes it seem that U.S. foreign policy has no role in creating threats against the country. But we know the number one thing driving recruitment for the Taliban and al-Qaeda forces in Pakistan and Yemen are U.S. drone strikes. Yeah. So they say, well, don't worry about anything else, just give us these powers and we'll take care of everything. But in fact, that's not the case. It's U.S. foreign policy that's the real culprit if we want to be safer, and we shouldn't be giving up our constitutional rights to this small cabal of people living in secrecy.
Okay, Suzanne, you wanted to jump in New York? Go ahead.
Well, look, I can't agree with the idea that the main threat to U.S. security is the U.S.'s own foreign policy. I do think that it's essential to keep in mind that these policies have consequences, that they can turn people against the United States. We've seen that in this case quite concretely with the rifts that have opened up with German Chancellor Angela Merkel, with Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff canceling a visit to Washington. those are pretty serious. They put the president in an awkward situation, and I don't think there's any question that these revelations have caused diplomatic damage. At the same time, I think we need to be a little careful in how we message this publicly. I don't know that we should call it a Frankenstein monster. You know, when we surveyed writers, we didn't get a lot of stories back, or even really stories back of people who had gotten caught in the dragnet, who'd written an innocent email and suddenly found somebody knocking at their door. That's not happening today as far as we have heard. But what there is this chilling effect that is more subtle, you know, maybe in some ways quite insidious. We also do know that there have been mistakes in the application and the exercise of these programs, that sometimes they've looked at things that they, according to even their own rules, should not have. And with any program this large, that's going to happen. So I think we do need to be careful in terms of talking about what the real problems and flaws are, what real harm and damage we are seeing. If we paint it as an unqualified monster, I think there will be people who say, and there were people who even said in response to our survey, that they do recognize there's a need for some surveillance, there's a need for intelligence gathering. We've always done that. It does have a role to play in national security, but that this has gone too far, and we need to relook at what the limits are and where the boundaries should be drawn.
Yeah, but Suzanne, do you think the NSA is doing a very good job to convince the rest of us of what you just said? What you say is quite rational and straightforward, but they're not doing a very good job. They want to keep these powers. They want to make them legal, and they don't want to talk about what they're doing. They can't have it both ways, because if you want to have it both ways, people will consider them a monster more and more often as these leaks continue. I mean, isn't it incumbent upon the powers that be to come out and be a little bit more honest and transparent with people about these things?
I think it is. I mean, you've got to recognize that this is an agency that's built on a culture of complete secrecy, and they've operated these programs in some cases for many years, completely shrouded from any kind of public notice, and all of a sudden it was blown up in the open, and they're having to adjust to the fact that they can't do business in the quiet and secretive way that they are accustomed to, that they have to be accountable. And I think this is really brand new for many of the officials and officers who are running these programs. So that's a big adjustment. You know, the place where I think we really need to look at it for accountability is the executive branch, the president and the White House, where their job is not to gather intelligence. I mean, I can understand if you're running an intelligence program and somebody gives you access to this incredible sweeping breadth of information, you know, and it's your job to ferret out terrorists, you're going to say, terrific, you know, this is just a gold mine, and I can pour through it endlessly, and maybe I'll find some useful leads. And, you know, that person's probably just doing their job. But it's the job of the president and of the executive branch, the Justice Department, the Congress, the courts. They're the mediators in this. They're the ones who have to say, okay, this person finds value here. He believes that this information is useful and necessary. How credible is that claim? What's the evidence that these programs really advance our security, that they really uncover plots? And then on the flip side, what are the consequences? What kinds of harms result from these programs? Are we creating a real breach of trust between the American people and our government? Because the consequences of that could be very far-reaching.
And the very reason why we... I'm sorry, Eugene, we've run out of time. I really liked how we ended on the program here. Many thanks to my guests today in Washington and in New York. And thanks to our viewers for watching us here at RT. See you next time, and remember, CrossTalk rules.
I love you.